Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good evening. Welcome to another show of Your Health and Wellness. I'm Khawa Solomon. Stay with me for the next hour as we focus on women's wellness and more specifically your hormones. So if hubby's saying, why are you screaming? Why are you upset? Why are you full of moods? It just could possibly be related, and sort of for us women to understand our bodies and to understand that sometimes we can just blame the hormones. In studio we have Dr. Raisa Abu Baker all the way from Durban. She's joined us in studio today. But do note that if you'd like to be part of the show, please contact us on our various social media pages, inshallah, as well as catch the upload of this show on YouTube the next day. And if you have any colleagues, family and friends watching across the lands and over the beautiful seas, they can do so via www.hilaal.tv. So to introduce on the Health and Wellness Show today, we have Dr. Raisa Baker, a homeopathic practitioner based out in Johannesburg, based out in Durban, and as well as in Roseback here in Johannesburg. She has completed her homeopathic medicine at the Durban University of Technology. Dr. Raisa then furthered her studies into functional medicine with the American-based Institute of Functional Medicine. Her experience is integrative medical weight loss and integrative medicine has taken the industry to new heights. As we know, all women are trying to lose weight, and sometimes it is hormonally related, and has won her BWARBAA award for the Best Emerging Entrepreneur for 2016, and she was also the finalist for the Minara Business Awards and Women of the Year 2016. We must say, alhamdulillah, she's also well spoken on Radio Al Ansar and does a weekly health segment on the Breakfast Rush show at Radio Al Ansar. But now let's welcome Dr. Raisa Abu Baker. Assalamu alaikum to you, Doctor.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me on your show today.
Shukran so much to you, Khair. Only a pleasure. I've been waiting a while to get you in studio, and finally you here. I know we chatted a bit about female and of course you specialize in women's wellness and health, and it's not often that we try and find that perfect doctor or someone that understands, because at the end of the day, women know women. But firstly, before we get into the topic, tell us a little bit about yourself. And you established this great institution of Dr. Baker and the whole idea of the weight loss naturally. Tell us a bit about that, inshallah.
So I studied homeopathic medicine, which is a 6-year course, very similar to medicine. The difference is that we don't actually perform surgery. We also study medical pharmacy in the course as well as obviously the homeopathic medicine. And then when I qualified, actually it's a funny story. The day I had completed my master's degree, my thesis, and before I even handed it in, I was 8 months pregnant and my water broke. So the day I completed my studies was the day that I gave birth to my second son. Yeah. So very familiar with the ups and downs of what women would experience in terms of their health and wellness, because I'm a female myself, and also because I've experienced different types of women in my practice and in my surroundings, and always wondered what's going on deeper in there. We're going into weight loss was one thing. It was actually not even something that I was passionate about at the time. It was, it just led me because my dad at the time he's a medical doctor. He had purchased a food factory. And while I was doing my thesis and like editing my research and so on, I would do it at the factory, and I just became familiar with the products that they would manufacture, and they were making health supplements and meal replacements and easy breakfast ideas for people who couldn't afford it. And so it got me thinking about all these carbohydrates and fats and proteins, and then he said, look, you can have your own range if you want to go into that. So I started there, and then I realized that it's not just about what you put in your body when it comes to females. There's so much more to our health and wellness, the way we feel emotionally, the way we feel physically. What do we feel like in the morning when we wake up? Do we wake up with a spring in our step, or do we wake up, I'm so tired? Are we that type of person who says, I'm so lazy all the time, or are you just really truly tired? And often I hear women saying, I'm just too lazy to exercise. But it's not that. You do so much more than that. You take care of kids, you take care of your husband, you take care of your household. And many women these days are entrepreneurs as well. So there's so much to do and to juggle. I just thought that why can't we help this woman get to the root of her problem and get her living the best quality life that she can?
It's so true what you said, because even recently I was listening to a lactation consultant and she was saying that as a mom, if you're not feeling hungry, then there's something wrong. If you're breastfeeding, you must feel hungry. You must want to eat. But it's about what you're eating. Like, stop trying to diet and watch what you eat, in the sense that, I can't eat. You must feed yourself. So
the word diet in itself is such a scary word. Dare I eat today? But it's not even about that, because diet usually means for people just cutting down calories. But it's definitely not about how many calories you put on in your body. That idea, that notion of calorie deficit's going to make you lose weight needs to go out the window, because it's definitely not true. And people with hormonal imbalances, there's so many hormones that we'll get to. But some people with specific hormonal imbalances don't feel hungry, so they don't eat, and their metabolism then doesn't work, and that's why they don't lose weight. So calorie deficit for them is actually going to be a bad idea.
It's crazy, hey? And then they're still picking up, eh?
And they still gain weight.
Okay, so just on the whole idea of homeopathy, it can be quite new to someone if they haven't been introduced, they haven't heard of it, and also they're just into allopathic medicine.
Definitely.
So let's talk homeopathy.
Like me. So when I know it sounds strange. When I was growing up, I had really bad asthma that started at about the age of 12, 13. And it was so bad that every year, twice a year, I would need to be hospitalized for my asthma. I would be handed 16 prednisones or, have IV steroids just to help me breathe. And it carried on for a long, long time. And then it came to a stage where now I was obviously completing school. I had to decide what I wanted to do. And I come from a family, well, actually 95% of my family are medical doctors, gynecologists, dermatologists, general practitioners, orthopedic surgeons, you name it. And when I was in matric, I decided that I wanted to get married. My husband and I had met, and we decided that this is the right thing to do. And my parents said to me, no, you can't get married. You have to study, because I came from an academic family. So my father said to me, if you really want to get married and it's your matric year, you need to make a condition that you would, go to university and study and make something of yourself. So that was the condition, and I agreed, and my husband agreed, and we got married. And then it was time to apply to university for whatever I was going to study. And I thought I was going to study medicine. And one day I went to work with my dad, and I think I was turning 16 at the time. I was 15 years old. And it just so happened that at that moment, his practice is opposite a hospital. A woman was walking past, and she was 9 months pregnant, and she was screaming because she was in labor, and the hospital turned her away. And so my father called her in, and he put her into one of his examination rooms. And I was there, and he pulled me in, and he closed the door, and it was just him and I and the dentist. And he said, we're going to deliver this baby. And I thought to myself, I'm only 15. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And it was a bit shocking. And I wanted to reevaluate what I wanted to do then. It wasn't that I hated medicine or didn't like what I saw. It was just I had this feeling that I need to explore other options. So my uncle, who was an inspector for the Department of Education, said to me, there's another course that you can do that's very similar to medicine, but it uses more natural medicine. And we don't have anybody in the family that has gone down this alternate health route. So why don't you? It'll be easier also because you're married and now you're female, and it might be difficult for you to be sleeping in the hospital and so on. So I looked at it and I thought, this looks interesting. Like, there's no side effects to the medicine. So I went ahead and applied for the course. When I applied for the course and I got accepted, I was again 8 months pregnant. So I went for my interview and was accepted within 10 minutes of my interview because of my family's background of being in the medical profession. And then I delivered my first son. 6 weeks later was the first year of university. But my asthma was still there. It was just as bad. Like nothing changed.
As well.
Through my pregnancy, after I gave birth. And so I went to my professor and I said, can you help me? Because I can't deal with this. I can't keep taking steroids all the time. Every time I took a steroid, I would blow up and, gain like 10 kilos. And then, hard to lose the 10 kilos from a steroid. So he said, okay, let's start your treatment. And at one point, I was so sick. I was sick for 3 months. And I ended up in hospital with an infection of the lining of my lungs so bad that I couldn't even lie down. So I went to see him again and I said, we have to do something. So when he treated me, that was 23 years old at the time, I have not had an asthma attack in the last 13 years because it was treated in a different way from just giving me the steroids.
Your homeopathy
professor.
With
purely homeopathic medicine, my asthma is completely gone. And I didn't have asthma as a baby. I developed it as a teenager. So that means it's lifelong asthma. But alhamdulillah, for the last 13 years, I have not had one single attack from being somebody who even missed my own Mehendi function before my wedding because I was in hospital with an asthma attack. So that really changed my life. That made me believe in it more. Although I was already a few years into studying homeopathy, what I saw there and what I saw in my son's immune system by using homeopathic medicine really changed my outlook on how I would want to treat a patient myself and what I would want for other people as well.
And I think in every journey, there's reasons, and it's not just by accident you happen to get to this, and this was Allah's way of putting you on this journey, alhamdulillah. But we'll want to know more about homeopathy and how it exactly works before we talk about the hormones and how women are having issues around that, weight gain, mood swings, thyroid issues. Yes, it's all hormone related and possibly can. We're chatting to homeopathy Dr. Isa Abu Baker, but more just after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We're in studio with Dr. Isa Abu Baker, the founder of Dr. Baker since 2011 and has women's wellness at her core and interest. We're chatting to her about hormones, women's related hormone conditions, and as we started the conversation, homeopathic medicine, how exactly it does work. So let's get into that conversation.
Okay. So homeopathic medicine itself is based on the thinking of like cures like. So for example, I'm trying to use the easiest example that I can think of. If you have a bee sting, you would actually, how they say that, so let's take, for example, when a fly falls into your food, and that sunnat of dipping the other wing in, it's based on the same concept, like cures like. So if you're stung by a bee, your remedy is actually made from a similar compound in the bee sting to help you to treat the symptoms of swelling and heat and redness that would come. So it's based on the thinking of I'm not sure if you've heard of this, the memory of water.
Yes.
Have you heard of it?
Yes.
So when you add,
shake it so much times,
exactly. So when you're making a homeopathic medicine, the medicine is the original complex is diluted many times in water, and the more diluted it is made, the higher the strength. So the deeper the effect would be. So if it's a low potency or low dilution, it will treat more physical symptoms, and the higher the potency or the deeper the dilution, the more internal and even mental symptoms it can treat.
So there's a drop of that bee sting compound in that water, and then it's diluted.
It's succussed and diluted.
And the more that it's diluted, that is the highest.
So physically for a bee sting, that would be physical. Okay. But then something deeper would be a child's fever. If that child is red hot, swollen, what about like things like your tonsils? If they're red hot and swollen, it indicates that would be the remedy that you would use. But then you get a little bit deeper into alternate medicine and into homeopathy as well, where you would use herbal medicines to treat. So for example, using valerian root to calm you down, to help you to sleep better, or using anika, the plant, orally to take it internally. If you've had an injury where you were bleeding, it actually stops bleeding. So much so that women who bleed when they hemorrhage during their cycle, so women who have hormonal imbalances, if we're struggling to control the bleeding, we can actually give them anika in homeopathic medicine to stop the bleeding, but we give it to them orally. You don't apply anika topically onto any cut or wound, it will make it bleed more, because that's what the original substance would do. But in a homeopathic potency, it will actually stop the bleeding. And we've seen that many times in women where we're looking for something to give them immediately, or the side effects of the medicine they usually take to stop the bleeding are too intense for them to manage. then using the Anika instead really helps. So the idea of like cures like, and the idea of the memory of water really explains the scientific background of homeopathy. And I think that's where what people didn't understand before, like where was the evidence?
Yes,
So
there's
this
no
is the
science behind
evidence.
it,
Yeah, you definitely look further into, if you want to know more information about homeopathy, look into the memory of water, because if you think about Islamically as well, many times we're told read Manzil or read Surah Yasin and blow in the water, and the molecular structure of the water changes when you do that. And they've experimented with this in terms of using two different bottles of water in two different rooms, and having one room where people were just negative and angry all the time, and having the other room where people were happy and positive, and they used the two bottles of water to feed two plants, and one thrived and the other didn't.
Wow.
Because the molecular structure of the water changed just based on the energy in the room.
Very true. I have heard of that, and definitely going to put up some pictures for people to understand that. But we also know that the fact that when we make dhikr, I know my granny used to say, put some water in the middle of the room and then have everybody drink from it after that. So we know that vibrations of the dhikr enter that water, and you get that barakah of it. So just
so
the
we
old
can't
people,
deny the evidence there.
the memory of water. So there you have it. The understanding of hormone imbalances, if we could just look at that and the hormonal disorders, it's there. I mean, men and women have it, but we just show it more. So let's talk about what are the four main types of hormones that we get in our bodies, in females?
So the reason women feel it more is because women are more complicated beings.
Let's just put it out there. There's no ifs and buts. I'm so glad you said
women
that.
are so complicated, and also
you take us with that complication. I'm so glad you said that.
And I think also the important thing comes in, especially with the hormones, which we'll go into, is that your body as a female can grow another human being. Who else can do that? No one else can do that. You're a female, you can do it. Most women can do it. So, or have the potential and the tools to do it. So the hormones that we have in our body also play a role in how a woman is going to, whether she is going to fall pregnant or whether she has a regular cycle or not. And sometimes we just think, oh, it's just estrogen, progesterone, FSH and LH and prolactin that we need to worry about. But we forget about the simpler hormones like the thyroid hormone, for example, and how is that functioning? Is it functioning optimally, suboptimally, not functioning at all, or functioning too much? So there we've got four different types of thyroid conditions.
And it's such a tiny little gland, eh?
It's a tiny little gland
in
that
your
sits
neck that's
here.
so exposed.
Yeah. And often it gets neglected, and it doesn't happen where somebody will become or go into a state of hormonal imbalance just overnight. It doesn't work like that. It works in stages, and it's a process. So you can actually identify in somebody's life whether they're going to have a thyroid problem in the future. And if you track them long enough, you can prevent them from having that problem. You can save somebody from having an underactive thyroid. The other very important hormone that we often neglect to talk about is the hormone insulin, or people who confuse insulin with sugar. So we ask a patient, have you tested your insulin levels? And they say, yes, I did this morning and it was 5.6. But that is not the same thing as testing the hormone insulin. That's just your blood sugar. You can do a finger prick at home. And most of the time, it's forgotten about, or it's missed because the blood sugar is still normal. So think of it this way. I'm sure you know diabetics in the family or friends that are diabetic, type 2 diabetics. They didn't become diabetic overnight. It's a process. It takes like 20 years for you to become diabetic. But 20 years ago, if we looked at your fasting insulin, we could have picked up that you're going to become diabetic now and possibly have prevented it from happening. So although these hormones, thyroid hormone and insulin, are not female hormones, they have such a huge impact on female health because they dictate how the female hormones are going to be produced. So those women who have poor thyroid function, if they fall pregnant, they're more at risk of miscarriage. Those women who have insulin that's very high, they're at risk for polycystic ovarian syndrome. So these are the base hormones, and then from there, you're ending up with more medical conditions.
What are the hormonal disorders that females do suffer from?
The most common ones that we see in practice polycystic ovarian syndrome. I see a lot of women with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. We also see hypothyroidism on its own, which is just a sluggish thyroid gland that refuses to produce its own hormone. And our goal is to nourish that gland and get it to start making its own hormone again. When it comes to the insulin resistance, remember I spoke about how I had asthma and I had to take steroids, and that was the only thing that would help. But every time we're giving our child the steroids, we are raising their insulin, because steroids are cortisol. And if they need to take it, they need to take it. It's a life-saving medicine as well. But every time we are stressed out, we produce cortisol. Every time somebody scares us or puts us through trauma, or we go through grief, or we get mugged or robbed or hijacked, we produce tons of cortisol and adrenaline. And the reason we do that is so that our body can make energy quickly. So the cortisol makes your liver release sugar into your blood, so we can quickly use that energy to run away from the situation or deal with it. And then...
So sorry to break your words. So there is actually a reason why stress impacts high blood pressure. And nobody explains that. The doctor will just say, oh no, it's stress. And you think, oh my goodness, I need to be stopped.
Yeah, but you can't stop being stressed, especially if you're a mother and
so
there's
actually science behind it that releases that cortisol.
So the cortisol makes your liver release sugar into the blood, and then you have to, then immediately your pancreas knows, it's like a biofeedback, that it needs to produce insulin so that you can put this sugar into your cells to make energy. But if you are insulin resistant, or if it's been happening for too long and your blood sugar's been jumping up and down for too long, then you are going to have insulin resistance where your cells don't listen to insulin anymore. And then they have to produce more. Your pancreas has to produce more insulin to try and keep your blood sugar normal. So over time, from like 6 units of insulin, you start producing 10, then you start producing 15, then 23, then 30. So the moment a fasting insulin is above 10, that means that patient is at risk for insulin resistance, and it means that that sugar is not being used as energy, it's being stored as fat, because your body doesn't know how to make energy from it. So you end up with a child who now starts getting a big tummy or a round face, or you yourself as an adult are noticing you're only gaining weight on your tummy. So even if it's not medicine related, even if it wasn't the steroid that did that, it could be stress. So you're constantly stressed, and now you don't know how to deal with the stress, so that's what your body's response is. But how do you then come back and not be stressed? You have to teach, or we have to teach together using functional medicine, teach your body how to manage stress better, that it shouldn't overload the cortisol at that time. Or how is your stress response? Are you the type of individual that gets stressed very easily? And are you getting stressed so easily because you also have an underactive thyroid, and now you are just more anxious because of the disease? So one is the actual life history and what's going on in your life that's making you stressed, and the other is the hormonal imbalance is making you feel worse about it. So if you're anxious and sad and depressed, is it 10 times worse because of this underlying medical condition?
So the functional medicine you also mentioned, which is additional to the homeopathic medicine. Okay, we'll touch on that when we come back, inshallah, on the short break, as well as the symptoms, the causes, what's happening in your life now. We know it's definitely not just stress, and how the stress impacts your sugar levels. Oh my goodness. More with Dr. Raisa Abu Baker just after this. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Yes, we're talking about hormone-related conditions in women's wellness on today's Health and Wellness Show. I'm Khawa Solomon, and in studio we have Dr. Raisa Abu Baker, who has both surgeries here in Johannesburg and in Durban. She is passionate about weight loss and any weight-related issues where we found that, you know, it's actually hormone-related and possibly what is happening with your body. So yes, you are what you eat, but sometimes there's so much more going on in your body because of stress. So very interestingly to know. I know you, just before the break, you spoke about, and I see the passion with weight loss and how it's all now connected to childhood illnesses and women wellness, because it comes from there, and you know how you felt during that time. So to give back to women to sort of understand that, alhamdulillah, so glad Allah put you through that journey for a reason. So let's understand the actual hormone balances treatment. You mentioned some of the
functional medicine.
Functional medicine and the symptoms that are involved in that and how you treat it.
So functional medicine is, so anybody with a degree in some kind of medicine. So I studied homeopathic medicine.
Okay.
If you studied conventional medicine, so your general practitioner, your gynecologist, your dermatologist, anybody with a medical degree can study functional medicine. So it's expanding your practice. So because I went into functional medicine, and I have so many conversations with my father about functional medicine, and people always ask me, like, do you not argue about antibiotics and things? No, we are beyond that kind of thinking. If somebody
It's
needs
more
an
interesting now.
yes,
Yeah.
if somebody needs an antibiotic because they have a bacterial infection, makes perfect sense. But often we have had conversations about patients who've had symptoms, and if you look at it from a functional point of view, we've come to a diagnosis better using functional medicine. So functional medicine incorporates the use of homeopathic medicine, herbal medicine, nutritional medicine, but it looks at the root cause. So we don't just tell a patient, okay, you're diabetic, here's your medicine to lower your blood sugar. We talk to them about their lifestyle, what are they eating. We don't put them on diets.
It's a team of
And we look at nourishing the pancreas so that they can produce the right quality of insulin, but also sensitizing their cells to their own insulin so that their cells can listen to the insulin and take the sugar in, so the blood sugar comes down. So it's not just about popping a pill and keeping your sugar down. It's about treating why you have diabetes, because diabetes is not a disease. It's a lifestyle condition.
So it's not and what about things that are hereditary?
So you have a tendency towards diabetes if it's in your family, and we know in South Africa a lot of people are diabetic. But if you know you have a family history, even when we see my youngest patient in terms of weight loss is 4 years old. When she was 4 years old when she came to see me, and her family history was important because her mother was insulin resistant and her grandparents were diabetic. So she has a tendency towards it. So in the lockdown that happened in 2020. For that 5 weeks, we all stayed at home. What did we do in that time? We watched TV, we just hung around,
lounged, potato couches,
made banana bread, we fed our kids, and then we as adults all went back to work. And what did our kids do? They had to stay at home and do nothing. And online school for the rest of the year. So that period of time where the activity dropped and the eating became more regular, because you're at home now, full access to the fridge. Many children became insulin resistant. So do you want to put your child on a medicine now at 4 years of age that they have to take for the rest of their life? Or do you want to fix the problem and get them sorted out within a year? So that's what functional medicine does. It treats the root cause, and it looks at down to a cellular level, how can we help this patient so that at one point in their life, they don't have to take any treatment. And that being said, I mentioned a 4-year-old, but there are many patients that are like 65, 70-year-olds who have been diabetic for a very long time, and their blood sugars are becoming imbalanced and they don't know what to do. And when they seek help from a functional medicine practitioner, they can actually still reverse their diabetes at that age. And I've seen it in my own practice. If they are diligent with how they take their functional medicine, if they take care of their notes of how they manage their blood sugar, so they bring it to us every month and we can pinpoint and say, hey, you know what, that night you were in pain, you hurt your ankle and it was throbbing, or you had gout or something. The night that you were in pain, your blood sugar was higher because the same cortisol response. The body is in pain, the body is stressed, the body is going to release sugar to try and deal with the stress. So we try to explain that to them so that they know this is how I should take care of my body, and then reverse the process, because really we have to remember that some things are not diseases, they are actually lifestyle conditions, and there is a place for diseases and there's treatment for that, but it may differ from patient to patient.
And so in between, if you can stop or reverse or try and eliminate something before it started, why not?
Definitely.
Let's talk about hormone imbalances and some of the symptoms that actually does present for women that we can help understand our body.
Okay, the most common symptoms that I see in my practice are young females with irregular menstrual cycles. So when we say an irregular menstrual cycle, we don't just mean that they're missing periods. Sometimes we see a child who's getting a period too often, like every 2 weeks, or bleeding too heavy, or not bleeding at all, or bleeding, almost bleeding out to the point where they need blood transfusions. And this is not only true for young females, it can happen to women closer to menopause as well, as their estrogen levels change. And so with time, other symptoms will develop. They'll say, I'm feeling tired all the time. I can't wake up in the morning. I don't have an appetite. I am feeling dizzy. My hair is falling. I have pigmentation on my skin. So these are signs that we take for granted. We think poor energy or bad looking skin or breakouts are just aesthetic things, but they're not. They're actually signs of underlying conditions going on. But when it comes to a female's menstrual cycle, it can tell us so much about a patient. And we ask them to just tell us for the last few months what their cycle has been like, and also to, in the future, now that they're a patient of mine, to keep track of their cycle. And if they have any problems once they've started the treatment, for example, their next cycle is just as heavy as the last one, then they keep in touch with us and tell us, okay, doc, my cycle's heavy again, what must I do? And we tell them with the medicine that they have on hand how to adjust the dose to support the female system, not to give you hormones or take away your hormones or just stop the bleeding, but to get the hormones balanced so that we can control the bleeding. So there's two ways it goes. It's either that the patient is bleeding too often or too heavy, or they're not bleeding at all. So they've had one period and skipped 6, or having one period in 2 years. And fine, some people may say they're happy with that, but it's not okay, because once that young girl gets married and she wants to fall pregnant, how is she going to fall pregnant without ovulating and having
the investigation happens?
Yeah, and so the younger you are that you catch it, the better. But it can be treated at any age. Primarily, the symptoms are of polycystic ovarian syndrome, irregular cycles, weight gain, facial hair growth, acne. Where is the acne is so important. Is it on the back, the chest, the face? Where on the face is the patient suffering with acne? Hair loss, brain fog, irritability, like the moods are really bad, mood swings.
I'm sure that's not just with PCOS.
It's often with females who have an androgen imbalance. So we don't...
And what is androgen doing?
Androgens are your male hormones. You know, they say a hungry man is an angry man. It's very true, because if your insulin is high, your androgens become imbalanced. It has a direct impact on your androgens. So your mood will be affected. But besides your mood, your androgens control how much of oil is produced on your skin. So if you're producing too much oil, then you are prone to breakouts and oily skin. So if you think about acne, acne is not just an aesthetic condition or about how you look and how clear your skin is. It's about the androgens and the insulin and the cortisol and the stress and whatever other hormones are linked to that. And once your androgens become imbalanced, then you make female hormones from androgens. So you heading down a path that you do. It's not a nice path to go down, but it's very treatable. If you, without giving you hormones, we can regulate the period by balancing the androgens.
You've mentioned two things with regards to hormonal imbalances. One being the bleeding, the menstruation, the PCOS. I can't remember what the other one was, but are there more conditions that are related to hormone imbalances?
Yes, endometriosis is one of them. Insufficiencies, so ovarian insufficiencies is becoming more and more common, where the ovaries just don't produce hormones in young females. So and
each one has its own symptoms?
They have similar symptoms. Some of the symptoms do overlap, especially when it comes to the period. So you have to do your investigation to determine which one is the patient suffering from. Sometimes they may have the symptoms, but they don't fit into a specific category. And then it could be just one hormone dominant over the other. So it's very important to understand that everybody's bodies are unique and individual. What may be normal for me may not be normal for you. So we can't just look at a blood test and say, okay, this is within normal range and it's fine, but the patient has every single symptom to say it's not fine. Then you should investigate further or treat it functionally and look also for nutrient deficiencies, because the quality of the hormone is also important. It's not just about the number in your blood, it's the quality. I can bring one cleaner into this room and ask them to clean, and they'll do a great job. Or I can bring 10 people who don't know what they're doing, and the room will still be a mess. So it's very important to note that the building blocks of any hormones comes down to what nutrients there are in the body. And I'm sure there are women out there, plenty of women out there. Actually, 99.9% of the women that we test for just something simple like vitamin D deficiency are severely deficient, let alone moderate deficiency. They are severely deficient in just vitamin D.
And that you get from the sun, which we have so much of.
Yeah, but the sun basically converts our cholesterol into vitamin D. We have to make it. If we don't have a body that functions properly, we are not making vitamin D. So the synthesis of vitamin D is lacking. And so we think we'll sit in the sun, but it's not helping. All we're getting is a tan. And it's so important that we treat that, because if you don't have the right ingredient to bake the cake is going to flop. You will still have a cake, but it will flop. So you have to actually look at nutrients as well.
So we understand the hormonal imbalances is throughout the body and presents differently and possibly also the same. And of course you then just have to go and have yourself checked and look at seeing a medical doctor instead of just assuming that you're just having a bad mood or it's just acne.
Yes.
And I want to go into the symptoms a little bit deeper and some of the hormone-related conditions and how we can now look at the way forward, some treatments, because as you're saying, it's both nutrition and that, what was that fancy word you used? The medicine, functional medicine. So it's all inclusive, and we are not eating the correct foods that organically as it should be.
Definitely.
So there is definitely many roles that's adding to our aggravated hormonal instances. So we'll chat more with Dr. Raisa Baker just after this. Stay with us. We delve into your nutrition, your lifestyle, the way forward in balancing that hormones and any hormone related issues with regards to women and their wellness. Back in a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back in our last few minutes of Your Health and Wellness Show. I'm Khawa Solomon. We're chatting to homeopathic Dr. Raisa Abu Baker, based out here in Johannesburg and in Durban. Alhamdulillah, we have her expertise on hormonal balances. She actively promotes a healthy lifestyle in her practice and through conversations like this and in the media, through nutrition, and has also published a health and wellness recipe book called Skinny Delicious, which assists patients in making better choices without compromising in flavor. And that is what we're going to be touching on somewhat in this segment. So, Doc, with regards to hormone imbalances and how the body actually works, how it is related to the body. Let's get into that quickly.
So the interesting thing is to note that your body is one being. We need to remember that. We often cut off parts and say, you know what, I have this problem. Yeah, I have this pigmentation on my face, or I'm gaining weight on my tummy, or I have a pain in my toe, or something like that. So it's very, very much connected. And sometimes when the body doesn't function optimally, like every patient I see, I ask them, do you go to the loo every day to pass a stool? If you're not going to the loo every day to pass a stool, you are not detoxing hormones that are building up in your body out, which means that there's going to be a buildup of something that shouldn't be there, toxins, for example. But even the buildup of hormones, the buildup of insulin, the buildup of androgens, the buildup of estrogen can lead to other symptoms, both in men and women. So when it comes to their nutrition and getting their bowel to work properly and getting their body to function optimally, it's all intertwined. That's the reason we came up with the recipe book, because we needed people to understand they can still have tasty food. People think that when they need to change their eating habits, they need to go on a diet and they need to stop eating them.
Don't eat
spices. Dare I eat today?
Dare I eat today? Okay.
So they feel that they shouldn't be eating spices. They must cook with salt and pepper. They must just eat chicken fillet and that's it, or chicken fillet and lettuce leaves. It's not that. So the recipe book was developed so that people could, enjoy like a spaghetti meal, but without exacerbating the insulin resistance that they have, or helping them find meals that had substitutes for dairy or substitutes for gluten, still enjoying a dessert or enjoying a fizzy drink without it being loaded in sugar. So the book has many different things: starters, main meals, desserts and drinks. And it's just an aid that we use to help patients make better choices. So our concept is not about being on a diet. We try to use the patient's lifestyle to dictate how their eating plan should be. So yes, I have a template of different types of eating plans, but I always go onto my laptop and adjust it for the patient specifically while they're in front of me, or if it's an online consult, I'll do it immediately after, based on what they told me they like to eat.
Okay.
So sometimes patients say, I skip breakfast. I can't eat breakfast in the morning. And people will say, but breakfast is the most important meal. But actually, you have to ask the question, why is that patient feeling that way in the morning? Why are they nauseous and if they eat in the morning? And most of the time it comes down to their body is saying, please fast so I can heal. I can heal myself through fasting. When we fast in Ramadan, we are healing our bodies.
Yes, we are, detoxing.
Yes, when animals are sick, they actually fast. That's the way their body heals. So in terms
because I was just, somebody said to me, no, they're not hungry. So I said, but I'm buying. And then they said, no, I'm not feeling well. And I said, but when you're not feeling well, you're supposed to eat. But it's actually
it's
amazing.
actually the opposite. So especially when it comes to people with polycystic ovarian syndrome, female hormonal imbalances, and weight gain around the tummy, and insulin resistance, their body often feels that they shouldn't eat in the morning because it's trying to keep their insulin level down. Because the minute you're going to eat something, your insulin's going to spike. And if you eat the wrong thing, so even if you can manage to eat a breakfast and you eat a bowl of cereal, then your insulin's going to shoot through the roof and you're going to feel so tired and sleepy and drained, and you're not going to be able to concentrate, and 2 hours later you're going to feel like you're starving again. So they feel, I might as well just skip breakfast because it'll carry me to 12 o'clock and I won't feel this way. I'll feel fine and I won't be starving in 2 hours time. So the type of breakfast or the type of person dictates how their eating plan should be. But also on the other hand, you get a patient who has low iron levels, who then will not have an appetite. So the signs of iron deficiency are that because they're bleeding too much or whatever the case is for their iron deficiency, is that their appetite will go down, but they particularly will not want to eat proteins. And where does protein come from? Animal meats, and animal meats are rich in iron, so steak and lamb. They particularly will say, I don't want to eat that. So in that case, if you try to bring the iron levels up to normal, you'll find that their appetite will improve. And many people will say, I don't want to take the iron supplement because it makes me eat more. But it's
the point is to eat the right stuff. Yeah,
but it's a bigger picture. You don't want to eat more because you're gaining weight. Why are you gaining weight? Because you have PCOS? Are you bleeding heavily because you have PCOS? You know, we have to ask all of those questions. So we're getting to...
all interrelated.
It's all one being. On the other hand, you'll get a patient who has a thyroid problem and they forget to eat. They'll say, I forgot to eat today. I didn't realize that I was supposed to eat and I'll just have supper. And yet their weight is going up and they're in a calorie deficit. So you have to remember, whatever your body type is, you have to stimulate your metabolism in the right way and fix the part of your metabolism that's not working. So if your thyroid is not working, it's not just about replacing the hormone. Yes, we will use the hormones to help us if we need them, but we need to make the gland work again. We need to stimulate the glands of the body, nourish them, and then regulate them so that they stay regular. So when it comes to people wanting to know, should they be taking what medicine, do they need to choose between allopathic and functional, or can they do both? You most definitely can do both. In fact, it may be better for you if you do both, if you use both. And that's what I like to preach in my practice, that it's not about choosing one way or dismissing one type of medicine. Your body is a being, it's one unit. It shouldn't be treated where different parts are cut off. And if there is something that you pick up in your bloods, then go back a year later to check, is it gone or does it reoccur? Stress and stressful events can trigger off health conditions. So if you were fine all your life and then COVID came in and the pandemic made you sit at home, that was a trigger. If you were fine all your life and you went through a traumatic event or something really stressful in your life, and you could end up with an autoimmune condition. And you know, the beauty of functional medicine, and it's made me realize this, and I've said this so many times to other people, is that Allah Ta'ala didn't create us where He would just say, there's no explanation for why you have this condition. You just have it. He doesn't do that. He has an explanation. If you go to ask why is it happening, and you look in the bloods and you look at the x-rays and you look at the scans and you look at the patient's condition and you send them for whatever genetic testings, you always come back with a reason. Otherwise, we would have things popping up and disappearing in front of us, supernatural things.
He does also say, you know, with every illness, there's a cure. We just haven't found it.
We just haven't found
Except
it.
for death.
Yes,
And I
that's
mean,
true.
all the cures that we know, all the illnesses we know of, it just hasn't, he has made a cure. It is
So
out
never
there.
ever feel that you have this condition because you're just stressed. There's a way stress does it, or there's a way that it happens, or your lifestyle or how you've been brought up
Yeah.
impacts on that. And there's always an answer. There's never
And
just...
sort of us to understand again, coming back to what you said, we are a holistic body.
Yes.
Everything works together.
Yes.
That acne or that outbreak could even be something to do with your brain. You
And
know,
can be
you never
something
know.
to do with your gut. And it doesn't have to be the food that you're
Jeez,
eating. It
yeah.
could just be your gut and the way it functions.
So the way forward, Dr. Abu Baker, looking at you as a holistic individual, you are influenced by people around you as well, your family, your husband, your partner, your children, and the rest of them. Like, oh, look at you, you know, do you live next to McDonald's or something like that, they would say. And as I was talking to this person, and they said, you know, just that word that one person said, I then had forever a weight problem. So it is a holistic approach. So we've got to be kind to ourselves and to the people around us, and sort of understand that when you want to start, you can start with your whole family. So if you want to make some changes, how does the whole family play a role in all of this?
So I always say to my patients, what does your family eat? Because, you know, mums, especially females, they don't cook what they like.
No.
They cook what their family likes. So I always ask them, like, what's your family's favorite meal? Or what are you cooking tonight? Or what did you cook last night? Just to get an idea of what types of meals they have and how much of food do they eat? And it's not about the calories that I'm asking that question. I'm asking about what does their plate look like? How many pieces of chicken and how many spoons of rice? Because most women, like 70% of women will say, I have 2 spoons of rice, or even if it's serving spoons, 1 piece of chicken, which is not enough. And it's probably like a bony piece. Most of the time they tell me it's a bony piece. It's like this tendency for women to go that way.
Less, yeah.
Or they'll choose the piece of meat that the rest of the family is not going to have. So because you put your family first. So we try to use that and give them ideas of how they can use the same meals, but just plate it differently for themselves and incorporate more color. You must eat everything that Allah Ta'ala gave you. Never say, this is vegetables going to affect my thyroid gland. Yes, if you eat 2 kilos of it at one time, it may. But if you're going to eat half a cup of it, it won't. And whatever Allah Ta'ala gave you is your fruit, your vegetables, rice, all of your meats, everything that walks on the land, that's halal for you, flies in the sky, swims in the sea, you can have that if it's halal for you. So have that instead of buying things that are pre-packaged. Because once you turn that box around or that can around and you start reading the ingredients, it makes you, like, you wonder, what is this? Can I even pronounce it?
And sometimes it's outside hormones you're putting in yourself.
Yes,
in your body
and
as well.
very often it is. And, you know, sometimes you have to find what are the food intolerances a patient has. And even if you can do it by blood test. We can prove intolerances by blood test now, down to things like dhania and mint and ginger and garlic. That's how advanced medicine has become.
Sure.
And then help the patient understand, this is what's good for your body. Let's try doing without the one item, not 10 things removed from your diet. Let's just
One at a
remove this
time.
one thing, or change this bread from the type you're having to this other type, something easily available, and let's see how you feel. And the patient will say, I feel so much better.
And you never know until you actually try it. So try bread, try sugar, try something, or maybe even dairy that you're intolerant to. It might just change your life. Dr. Abu Baker, shukran so much for your time. Jazakallah khair. So much that you've said and that I've tried to note down, but I'm going to watch the show again because I've definitely learned so much, and we must definitely have a follow-up show on homeopathic medicines and how we treat other conditions as well, and just get people to know about it.
I'd love to. Creating awareness is something I love to do. I'm very passionate about research, and I love hearing a person say, I feel so much better. That makes my day.
There we go. Dr. Abu Baker, integrative medical approach, incorporating both the psychological and physical needs to their patients. Jazakallah so much to her for her time. And stay tuned to Health and Wellness for more shows like this. Next up, you can catch a show on allergy with allergologist and pediatrician out in Durban as well. We'll chat to him, Dr. Ahmed Manja, next week, same time, same place. So join us and stay tuned. Wassalamu alaikum. Goodbye for now.